Okay, we'll come back to order. The next committee is the Lake Whatcom Reservoir and Natural Resources Committee, chaired by Councilmember Dan Hamill.
Thank you. I'm joined this afternoon on this committee by Councilmembers Knutson and Borneman. We have one item before us that's an ordinance amending BMC 12.12.280 regarding aquatic invasive species. Aquatic invasive species prevention program staff have evaluated the program's operations and are recommending amendments to this BMC. The changes will add a definition to provide for a third watercraft classification and will add a one-day pass. Other revisions included to enable the two main revisions and to clarify the definitions section per council direction given at the February 27th 2017 meeting. Staff have added language to allow for additional fees related to on-site inspections.
Thank you, Ted Carlson, along with Renee LaCroix. As Councilmember Hamill mentioned, this is a carryover work session from an item that was before Council on February 27th. The ordinance makes some of the major changes that were just mentioned, primarily adding a new classification of boat, and a one-day pass to go along with the 3-day and season pass that are currently available. Both of those are items that were brought forward by the users, that things that we hear about that would make the program more successful from certain people's perspectives, and we think they made a lot of sense. So the ordinance makes those changes. We spent quite a bit of the work session 2 weeks ago talking about off-site inspections. And something that we've been doing for 4 years now, where AIS inspection staff go to off-site locations to complete boat inspections. For typically large groups, we go to places where there's multiple boats, or places where people don't have the ability to bring their boat to Blodell Donovan. They may not have trailers. There's a boat that stays in the lake, and for other reasons, we go to off-site locations, and as I've mentioned, we've been doing that for a few years now. We do not charge for that, and I think that was one of the major points of discussion with Council previously, is should there be a surcharge for that service? So we have provided some information, and we've got a few slides that we want to walk through first to kind of highlight what we've been doing, give some information about the number of inspections that we've done, number of boats that are involved in those inspections, and some of the benefits. We did include in the ordinance in the packet today one amendment to the ordinance that identifies the ability to charge additional fees for these off-site inspections. That was not in the ordinance previously, so we did add that language for Council's consideration. But if it's okay with Council, we'd like to walk through some of this information or take questions, whatever you'd like to do.
Councilmember Borneman.
Yeah, I've got one question. At our last work session, I made a motion that was passed to table this until such time that the cost of staff's time were brought forward so we could look at that. I don't see them in the packet, so I'm wondering, if we don't have those, why has this come back?
Well, we're coming back with information today. Certainly, Council doesn't have to take action on the ordinance. The ordinance is in the packet with some amendments. What we have today is information that was requested in terms of how often do we do these inspections, what do the inspections consist of in terms of both location and number of boats, some additional information about the program. We have some information on the cost in terms of labor to do these, and we can go through that as well. But we don't have, what we don't have is any kind of recommendation on what a additional surcharge might be.
We didn't. The motion was very clear.
So would you like to just table it now?
It was table until such time that staff can bring back what the cost of this is. And that was the motion. It was very simple, not bring us this stuff and maybe pass it without any of that. It was clear. The motion was to table until such time. And I don't know why.
We are bringing that information now.
What was so hard about that, Ted? I'm confused.
Can
we have Renee share the information that she has here?
Yeah, she can share it, but I'm just making a point here. You're going against what we had asked. We tabled this until such time, very clear. Don't bring it back until you give us this information. But you bring it back and with the recommendation to pass. I mean, this is kind of like a little slap that I'm feeling, and I don't understand why. That's not how we are supposed to do policy here. And I'll listen, you know, Dan's in charge of this, but I just want to make it clear, I feel quite offended that you would do this when we've made it clear what we were asking for.
Let's hear the information that's being presented today.
Okay, thank you. So we brought back information about what our 2016 off-site inspections looked like, and we're lumping anything that wasn't inspected at one of our established sites, like Blowdale Donovan, South Lake Whatcom, and the Samish sites. Everything that's not inspected at those locations is considered off-site. So in 2016, we did close to 1,500 off-site inspections, and we lumped those into 320 different appointments. And so what this graph doesn't show is that staff is taking a lot of time to make sure that we're not going out one here and then driving back and then another farther down the lake and driving back. We're really making a concerted effort to group the boats in get as many boats per off-site visit as possible, and I think these numbers reflect that. These are the numbers that we heard council ask for, so this is a quick summary of what that looks like. So the number of boats inspected off-site for 2016, like I said, was close to 1,500. The percentage of what that represents for our total program is 16%, and we lumped those into 320 different appointments. The way it breaks down is that appointments that had 10 or more boats per appointment was 53, and the number of boats with less than 5 was 29. Appointments for one boat, we had 15, and those typically are not done at people's homes. They're typically done outside of our regular season. So our regular season, when we staff the formal launches, runs roughly from the third week in April to the end of September. We do have a lot of boats that want to be inspected outside of that season, and so we consider those off-site inspections because we're not normally staffed during that time. Yeah, and then the last two are just the dates. And this graph, I think, kind of sums it up of what we deal with as far as offsite inspections. So the season starts roughly here. So all these boats we're able to inspect before the season actually starts. And you can see the numbers. So these are not just for the event listed here, but everything that was inspected on that day. So with Jaegers, it wasn't just the Jaegers boats, it was everybody in that neighborhood or that vicinity that brought their boat to Jaegers that day, or other inspections we had on that same day. And this one, I think, is very interesting. So Utah is short for very high-risk boat, and we were able to inspect that boat because we provide the service of off-site inspection outside the regular hours. So we're able to reduce our risk for the program and protect water quality because we offer the program and we offer off-site inspections. And this is a breakdown of how many boats are inspected for each of the larger places that request this service. And I think it's illustrative. It shows that with a lot of these, like Lakewood, for example, it's an opportunity to get a lot of the boats all at once, oftentimes without having to have all of these boats go to our launches. And I think if you had this many boats coming to our launches during the first few weeks that the season's open, our launches would be incredibly backed up and the wait time would be quite long. So I think it speaks well for the program.
Committee members, questions? I have a question. What I'm trying to get my head wrapped around is the cost of these inspections. We're providing what I would characterize as a concierge level of service to these boat owners, and we're bringing staff directly to them. So that's a convenience that these boat owners are realizing. So what I'm trying to understand is what is the cost? Because this should not be free. There should be a fee associated with this. And the problem that I have with the language under 3 F on page 39 is that this service may be subject to a fee. I guess my perspective is that this service will be subject to a fee, and I want to understand what the cost is of that inspection when we go do
Sure.
inspections at Lakewood, for example.
So when we actually looked at staff costs for this, and we haven't been tracking staff costs to this level because the cost recovery is an important part of the program, but the primary point of the program is to protect the drinking water source. And so when we went back and tried to retroactively determine that cost, it was difficult. If you simply take the amount of staff time that we had on our calendars that went to offsite inspections, it works out to about $9,000 a year. So if you divide that by the 320 offsite visits, you come up with, well, sorry, it would add about $3,000 to the program if we were going to add $5 to that program. So it gives you a rough sense of cost, but it's not, I guess, it's not, in my opinion, accurate to use those costs because you then start externalizing all the costs for running the program in the first place, right? All the training, the decon unit, the trucks, the tents, and things like that. Because the only number that that we're talking about is the actual staff labor to go out and do those inspections, and so it's not truly representative of the cost of the program. I think there's a lot of benefits to the program. So you talk about that it's a concierge service, and I think that word would be appropriate if we had designed this offsite part of the program specifically for the benefit of the lakeside residents. And that's not how it came about. When we, back in 2013, we did a barriers analysis, and we looked at all the different ways that we're preventing people from participating in the program because we're trying to increase participation in the program. One of the things that came up was there's a high probability of people living on the lake that have access to private boat launches on the lake not having an ability to get their boat to the checkpoints. They don't have trailers. And so we're trying to get people into the program. When we're looking at the different barriers that came up, they have access to an existing launch, or they don't have a way to transport their boat. They're wanting to get checked outside the regular season. And some places, like I mentioned in the graph, some places have 20 boats or more. So we started doing the offsite program, and there's a lot of benefits in doing that, not necessarily to the residents of the lake, but to the program itself. And that's what I want to emphasize, is that the offsite inspections provide our inspectors with a really low-stress environment. And we can go out and have great low-key communications with the people whose boats we're inspecting, and it allows for that educational element that's sometimes difficult to get at the lake, at the check stations when we have a lot of boats lined up. It allows the inspectors to actually monitor on the lakeside properties where we wouldn't normally have access. So we can actually go out with the residents and say, what do you have on your site? And help them figure out what they're looking for, so then they can be eyes on the lake as well. So there's a monitoring benefit. And I think there's a big visibility benefit where our inspectors are out at the lake. The neighbor might see them and say, hey, what are you guys doing? It's an opportunity to educate the neighbor as well and raise the visibility of the program. And it also reduces, I think you saw in the graph earlier, there's a pretty good chunk of boats that come through earlier in the season. And by getting those inspections done off-site, it allows us to have a better customer service during the actual season. So I don't think the word concierge is appropriate. I think it benefits the program more than it benefits the lakeside residents.
Well, this is how my perspective, I think, has been very clear, that we're providing a program for people to perform an unwelcome activity on our drinking water supply. And ratepayers are subsidizing that. So ratepayers that may never use the lake in this way are subsidizing this activity. So that's my perspective, and I would regard it as a concierge level of service because we're sending our staff out to provide these inspections when they're not performing some other function. Mr. Morneman.
Yeah, and I'm not doubting the benefit of the service, and I haven't heard anyone question that part. What I'm questioning is, it's our job It's this 7 up here, responsibility to make that determination about whether this is appropriate and cost. We have to make it the policy on these things. And when we ask for information, it's so that we can best make those decisions. I value staff and the input because we've got great staff. I don't doubt that. But at the same time, when we ask for information, it's for a reason. And we need that information, and we need to trust that it's going to come to us when we ask for it. And I'm not doubting that there's a benefit, but I still want to know how much is, and the citizens have a right to know that as well. That's the big reason it comes before us when we make these decisions. And so I will again move that this be tabled until such time that staff at least give us estimates on the cost of providing this service.
Committee members, council members.
Well, motion to table ends the discussion, so then we should move on, because this is a 5-minute item that's already gone 15. So, I mean, it's up to everybody else, but if you're going to table it, why are we going to sit here and discuss it anymore?
Okay, I'm going to recognize Councilmember Lillquist.
Thank you. Yeah, please don't table yet. I agree with Terry. I'm not interested in discussing the benefits of large-scale off-site inspections. I get it. There's benefits. I'm not even interested in discussing the benefits of smaller scale or single off-site or out-of-season inspections. I get the benefits of that, too. I think the discussion is really on the cost end and the per-unit cost end. And I think that's where the council is wanting to look at what it costs on a per-unit basis, and that may help to determine whether or not a surcharge is called for. If the per unit cost for inspecting 20-some boats at Yeager's, what was the Yeager's one? 27 boats. If the per unit cost, when you amortize all the program costs on a unit basis to this, might be pennies on the dollar, and let's not worry about it. But a onesie-twosie thing, it might be incurring $40, $50, $80, and therefore a little surcharge might be appropriate. I think that's what was sort of the sense of the motion. You showed a table earlier which you said X and over boats and 5 and under boats and then 1 and fewer boats. You kind of tried to create kind of rough groupings. Yeah, you said over 10 boats, less than 5 boats, and 1 boat. So one of my questions is, why did you choose 10 and the 5 as your cutoffs? When you looked at the data, did those make sense to you? And when coming back at the costs, it might be nice to try a few more cutoffs and thresholds to find out kind of where it breaks over from a low unit cost to a high unit cost. 'Cause I think that's the sort of information that Terry's motion was trying to get at. When do the unit costs actually become significant, and when do the unit costs actually aren't much of an increase at all? That was the question. That's at least what I was hoping to see in the question.
May I respond to that?
Sure, please.
So the way the off-site fee works is it's a fee for the visit, not per boat.
Right, but I think that's the whole point, though, is that there may be per boat minimal cost, in which case let's not have a heart attack over this, or it may be per boat there's actually significant costs. I think that's what we're trying to get at. Is there some kind of increased subsidy for a particular small group of inspections? And if so, we seek a surcharge. If there's not a particular increase, then maybe there's no need for a surcharge.
And I wish it were that simple, because a lot of times when a property owner gets their neighborhood together and has a whole bunch of their neighbors come and bring their boats, there's one off-site inspection fee that could be leveled for that. But then because our staff can't handle cash, how do you charge that? Right? So you have to split it between the 3 different property owners that showed up. You're talking, $3 here, $3 there. Our staff has to do a credit card transaction, just the way the program works, and then you have transaction fees on top of that.
I think that's the sort of cost discussion we were hoping for.
Councilmember Borneman.
Yeah, you got these slides here. We didn't get those. Can we get them? Because it would have been nice. when we're getting new information that they're in the packet, can we get a copy of these, because we don't have copies?
Absolutely.
Recognize Councilmember Vargas.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I clarify. So currently, everyone sees that there's value here to do this, but we don't have any kind of structure, 1 boat, 50 boats, any kind of service charge at all, right? So it seems to me that Brian and Finance could figure out a way for us, even if we have, okay, if it's over 50 boats, we don't charge. If it's 1 boat, there's a service fee. If it's 10 boats, it's a service fee. Like, it seems to be there's got to be, I think part of clarifying what we asked for as a council was, could we look at doing a service charge for a certain amount of boats off-site? And if there is something that we could look at for a pricing structure that would seem reasonable, but enough that our constituents would still consider this a benefit if they're getting their whole neighborhood together and it costs $20 to get the neighborhood. Maybe there's something they could fill out online, somebody pays for it, and the neighborhood pitches in the $20 and they just pay for it online in advance. I mean, it doesn't seem that difficult for us to find solutions if we could just find a way, realizing it is complicated. These are not all the same costs, but you know, if it's doing 50 boats, that makes a lot of sense for us to do it. But just looking at different tiers and possibilities for charges.
Thank you. I think this was a 5-minute discussion item and turns into 15 minutes, but I think this illustrates the tension that council feels between protections for the lake, the drinking water supply for 100,000 people, and the constant downward trend of cost recovery for this program. So this has gone down, let me make it clear, it's gone down year after year, so in terms of cost recovery. So ratepayers are paying more to subsidize this program that does protect the drinking water quality. There's no argument, from what I'm hearing from council, there's no disagreement, there's no daylight between us and staff in terms of the value of this program. It's the cost recovery component that's creating the tension, and this is going in the wrong direction, in my opinion.
I think one of the things council should consider is perhaps changing the ordinance to make it so that council sets the fee. Because I think that's probably the larger tension, is that council actually has no authority over the fee. And so I think that would make a lot of sense, because staff is always going to be in the position to make the program as successful as possible. We see it as a poor vehicle to address boats on the lake. What it is a vehicle to protect the lake. Boats are on the lake. And so you want to have a program that's as inclusive as possible, which is going to mean make it easy to participate in, keep the fees as low as possible. It's really not a good strategy for saying we want to have boats off the lake. But I think one of the things that you should consider is just making a motion to amend the ordinance and have council set the fee. I think that would make life easier for you.
Councilmember Borneman.
But to amend the ordinance, we still need the information, Ted.
Just
we
make a
need
motion.
the information.
Make a motion for that, but say.
I already did.
So make another motion
made.
that says you would like to amend the ordinance and have council set the fee. Because right now you have no authority to set the fee.
I have authority to ask you to bring back, which I did, the information that we asked for. How much is this costing the taxpayer? That's all I ask. And I don't think that's too much.
So on the offsite,
It's not about me setting that fee. It's about getting the information.
And we'll bring that information to you, Terry. We'll provide what we have. As Renee explained to you, we haven't captured the information to the level of detail that I think you would like to have. But it doesn't do away with every year we come here, and every year council says the fees need to be higher. We need a higher cost recovery percentage. And every year staff says, we think that's detrimental to the program. What we really care about is water quality. So I think we need to do away with that conflict and have council take over the rate setting authority. Then you tell us what the fee is, and we do the best we can to make it a successful program based on that fee. So would council make a motion to do that?
I've got a motion on the table right now that hasn't been dealt with yet.
Ms. LaCroix?
I just want to, the way I read what the motion was for the last council meeting was that we were bringing information back to you, which we have.
No.
We don't have the ability to provide you with the detailed information of how much exact cost it was for the city to do these off-site inspections per inspection. We
Don't
just
need
simply
exact.
don't have that level of detail. And just
We got
as a perspective, for the Lake Whatcom program, the Lake Whatcom management program as a whole, in 2017, we have budgeted close to $3 million for the HIP program, the AIS program, the land acquisition, our street sweeping, stormwater vault maintenance, our capital projects. And so for the city's portion of the AIS program, $177,000 represents roughly 6% of the total Lake Whatcom program costs. If you do the calculations for using the very limited information we have for the off-site inspections, those 320 inspections would represent 0.3% of the total program cost for the entire Lake Whatcom stewardship program. We're not talking about a lot of money.
Okay, I'll recognize Councilmember Barker, then Vargas.
Well, I think we should acknowledge the elephant in the room, and clearly it's that there's people on council that don't want to see boats on the lake. And I feel like this program is kind of being held as a tug-of-war piece for that very thing. And at this point, boats are on the lake. We haven't decided we're not going to have boats on the 5% of the lake that we control. So where I have a hard time with this, much with the HIP program, is that we do have conflicting interests. We're trying to get the program paid for, but at the same time, we're really more worried about the lake itself. And so I think when I'm hearing council, it almost feels like a family discussion where we haven't really acknowledged what the real issue is. So we're having an argument around the real issue, and it's this program is like the pawn of it. So I'll say what I said last time. I think we could use this year as research where staff can go out and start asking more questions while they're doing off-sites to try to figure out what costs would be permitted, what are some of the barriers that could come up with that. They could have more time to go over it, and we could move forward with getting this through and having it, the county approve and move on. I think we should maybe talk about what Ted discussed, although there's already a motion on the table. But I think as council, we have to take a step back. It's much like the jail. I mean, we want to change the whole criminal justice system, but the jail kind of gets pulled in there. And so I think we should be very patient with this and understand that ultimately it's the lake. It's the lake that we're talking about.
I'll recognize Councilmember Vargas, and I do want to move us along here. So,
I just wanted to recognize what you're offering to us, Ted, but I also think that your team does a great job of figuring out what those costs are and looking at how the neighborhoods will react to that. I don't have an issue with the costs of what we're charging right now or how we're running the program, but we are constantly looking for cost recovery so that we don't hear the stories of why people who don't live on the lake are paying for boating. So if there are other opportunities for us to have cost recovery, we don't, quite frankly, I don't need the exact number of what it's costing us. We know that it costs us more to be off-site than it does to be on-site. Just for us to look at an additional program that would cover some of those costs, not changing anybody who's going to the lake and going through the regular permitting or anything, just an additional opportunity for some cost recovery for off-site inspections. And obviously one being more expensive than 50 boats. So I do think that the costs that you have set currently for the people who are getting permits, I think they are very reasonable, and I think you guys have done a great job on that. So that's not what I'm interested in, just another opportunity for cost recovery.
okay, well, Councilmember Borneman, then I'm going to call for a vote.
Yeah, and this was supposed to be a very simple request on this one, that we get the cost. How much, we basically know what our staff cost is, how much does it cost their staff to go out there in time to do those, and mileage costs, and give us a ballpark figure on those kind of things. That, you know, we weren't asking you to pencil out everything down there. And this, you know, contrary to what April was saying, this is about this part of it, and that's all we were asking. Wasn't trying to shut it down or anything else. This was one part of it that we'd asked for. That's all I was.
And
that's what we were asking
I'll
for.
say it again.
And before you brought it back, so we could have this all a discussion, not try to persuade us not to ask for that information.
And maybe I
that's what it
wasn't
felt
clear
like.
what I said earlier, but in 2016, it came to about $9,000 to do 320 site visits where we inspected 1,500 boats. We brought the information back.
Okay, I'm calling for a vote. So my understanding of the motion was to table this until staff could come back with estimates or actuals on costs for off-site inspections. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, I'll bring this forward tonight.
That was your next committee?